Welcome to the 90th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with Sophie Littlefield that I recorded at the Thriller Fest conference in New York City. Littlefield is the author of the Stella Hardesty crime series, the After Time series, which is post-apocalyptic fiction, and many other novels. Stay tuned for the interview. So, welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Sophie Littlefield. Sophie is the author of a crime and mystery series. The latest book in the series is A Bad Day for Mercy. Sophie has also had a post-apocalyptic series published, the novels Rebirth, After Time, and Horizon. Sophie also has a YA novel that will be published in the fall. We're conducting this interview at Thriller Fest in New York City. Sophie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sure. Well, wow, you're a busy writer.
Yeah.
As I just explained in the intro. Yeah. First, let's talk about your Stella Hardesty crime series in your latest novel, A Bad Day for Mercy. If the listeners haven't heard about the novel yet, how would you describe it?
Stella Hardesty is a 50-year-old vigilante, basically. She lives in rural Missouri, and she was a domestic violence victim for 30 years. And then she killed her husband, did not go to jail, and formed a business helping other abused women take care of their own abusers. Believe it or not, it has a lighter or comedic tone, which not really sure how I pulled that off. And in the course of the series, she runs into a variety of different scrapes where she's called upon to help those that have been victimized. Great. Well, that's definitely a unique take on a series. Do you remember how you got the original idea? I do. I do indeed. I had been writing for a very long time, and I'd written 8 other novels, a variety of different genres, and they had sort of cleaved to traditional models and used protagonists who were perhaps a bit more expected or more common in the genre. And I was just fed up because I could not get the attention of an agent or editor. So I decided to do something just for me. And I was sort of approaching middle age, and I was a little irritable. So I thought that an angry middle-aged woman was sort of an intriguing idea. Now, it turned out to be a really tough sell, as you might guess. And I did make the rounds. That book went to 80 agents and was rejected. But Barbara Poyle, who is my agent now, found something to like about it, and that started a collaboration that continues today. She's my agent. She's fantastic. She is a champion of the quirky voice or the fresh idea, I guess I'd say. And she sent it out to 7 editors and was sort of roundly, if politely, rejected. I think there was a lot of hesitation about a character who is so unexpected. I should add that Stella is not a beauty queen, so she kind of breaks a lot of the mold. She's more of an every woman character, and I wanted her to stay that way. I received some interest from agents and editors who felt that if she were toned down or prettied up or made younger, that she might be a viable character, but we weren't willing to do that. And eventually we did find a home for Stella. So she was published by St. Martin's Press. Tony Plummer was my editor, and we were able to bring her to life as she was rather than changing her. And what has the reaction been to the series? Well, I have received a delightful reaction. I was going to say mixed, but it really hasn't been mixed. I've received support from men, from women. I had expected a middle-aged readership, and I have that. A lot of people buy my books for their mothers, which early on I found a little terrifying because there's a lot of rough language, a fair amount of violence and sex in the books. Well, actually, there's not that much sex on the page, but Stella does have kind of a randy personal life. So I was worried about that, but I have received such great support from mature ladies, from my age up to, quite elderly women. And it turns out that all women sort of have a taste for vengeance, I suppose, because the truth is that in our society today, it's rare to get to maturity or middle age without having been the victim of some sort of poor treatment. And I'm not saying abuse by any means, but one of the things that Stella fights against is societal expectations, and I think we all have felt the sting of that. Sure. And so I found an audience, and I was grateful for that. So what was your experience like of writing, I think you said 8 novels, and then writing this one, which was definitely a departure from the typical crime or mystery series? Do you feel like that kind of
had any impact in some of the other stuff that you're doing, your YA or your post-apocalyptic?
Yes, definitely. I had written, in addition to the novels that I had written, I wrote 20 true confessions back in the 90s, I suppose, at this point. And they taught me they're a wonderful tool to learn to write a tight arc. The names of the stories are a little bit silly. For instance, I wrote one called I Was a Priest's Love Toy. But it teaches you to compress story into a framework, and that was very valuable. I also have been a member of Romance Writers of America for many, 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 many years. And I don't write romance, but I learned a lot from them as well. And then of the books that I had written, those 8 books, some of them were romances. I was not able to sell those. I wrote women's fiction, and interestingly, I have a women's fiction book coming out next January, so I've sort of returned to that. It's called Garden of Stones, and it'll be coming out from Mira. And it is also, it's a women's fiction thriller, I suppose. And I also wrote a procedural at that time. And interestingly, I have a procedural coming out this fall from Simon Schuster Pocket. So I did return to some formats that I experimented with earlier. And I love the experience of writing in all different genres. And I actually feel, you didn't ask, but I'll say it anyway.
That's fine.
I think that different genres have more in common than they have that separates them. So I'm often asked, like, how can you do these different genres? But I really find that the experience it's very consistent. You're writing an arc with personal conflict, external conflict, character resolution. There's so much in common, and it's the things that differentiate them are smaller in my mind.
And so what was it like when you had that first book published? Do you remember that experience?
Sure. It was amazing. Although I have to tell you, nothing beats your first publication experience. And my first publication experience was a true confession.
Right.
And I remember walking to Walmart many, many years ago. I think I had a baby, my first. He's now 19. And I walked into Walmart, and the thing about True Confessions is there's no byline. So your name isn't on it. But the name of the story was on the cover. And I just about fainted. It was the most fantastic moment, for sheer publishing joy of my life. Now, when A Bad Day for Sorry came out, that was wonderful too. But it's different because, I had a long-standing writer community that was very supportive. I've been in the same critique group for over a decade, and they were wonderful. I'm kind of an introvert, so I don't like to do a big launch party or anything. I don't like to be the center of attention, so I didn't do that. But I did go out and I celebrated with my friends, and that's a tradition that we maintain today. And because they're all writers, we do it for when any of us has a new book out. We go in and we celebrate, and there's usually a bar involved, and that suits me just fine.
Great. Well, let's talk about your post-apocalyptic novels. I first heard about you when I read Paul Goat Allen's review of your novels, and he raved about them. What was it about the post-apocalyptic setting and genre that interested you and appealed to you?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I collaborate closely with my agent, Barbara, and she and I, a number of years ago, were at a conference somewhere, and she was saying, what I don't have on my list is, I don't have, a zombie novel or a apocalypse survivor novel. And we started talking about if we were to do such a thing, and it was all conjecture at that point, what would make ours different and what was lacking from some of the things out there. And, a lot of people at the time were spending a lot of effort on the is zombie dead discussion, and we didn't really spend much time on that. We were talking about what could make a series character compelling. And we knew that we would probably do a female character because most of my protagonists are female. And we knew that, again, most of my characters are parents, and the mother-child bond is an important feature. So we thought that would be important. And then I started talking to my brother Mike Cooper, who is an author also. He's the author of Clawback. And Mike is much better at the science and gadget aspects of things. So Mike and I started talking about technically how we would end a world. And we settled on this sort of bioterror thing. And I did get a lot of help from Mike with that, and also my editor Adam Wilson, who has since left Luna, which is the imprint that put that out, and moved to another house. But Adam and I became very close over the development of the series, and he and I spent a lot of time going, what if, because we wanted our series to be different. We wanted it to be very character driven, which I think it is, and we wanted it to really focus on the how would humans behave element, at least as much as the how would the earth restore itself element.
So are you going to write any more of those?
I would love to. I probably won't do another zombie novel because I also did a young adult zombie book. But
And that's the YA that's about to come out?
Actually, no.
Okay.
My first two YAs were a two-part series, Banished and Unforsaken, and they have a minor plot element that involves zombies. My new young adult is a standalone. That's coming out in September. It's called Hanging by a Thread, and it has a minor paranormal element, but I've really kind of gotten away from that there. What I'm interested in doing in my adult novels, and I don't have anything under development right now, but I would like to return to that sort of character-driven horror / apocalypse / ordinary humans in extraordinarily daunting circumstances setting. And I actually have an idea. I've got about a quarter of a novel written. I am really excited about it, but I can't write it until I finish everything else on my that I'm actually contracted for. So it'll be a while. But yes, I will definitely return.
So what was the writing process like for you with the YA? Did you find yourself having to pull back at all, or what was that like?
Yeah, that's a question that a lot, young adult authors are often asked. And the truth is that young adult audiences do not want less of anything. Their language is sophisticated. They do want a fair amount of pace, of action. But I think that's true of an adult thriller writer as well. I actually write for an older young adult audience, so some of my themes are more mature. I am a firm believer, as the mother of teenagers, that children will find the books that are right for them. I don't believe in censorship in any form. I think that you can give your children, or expose your children to a variety of books, and they will find the ones that are right for them, both at a maturity level, intensity level, language level, everything. So like I said, I do tend to write for a bit older teen, but no, I haven't pulled back, except in very specific ways that you could probably imagine, like certain things we don't discuss with children, but everything else I think is pretty consistent.
So what is the writing process like for you? Do you outline extensively? Do you write more organically? What's that like?
I have tried everything. I have, and so I've written, I'm on my 19th, 20th book, something, and I've tried everything. Early on, I was a fan of these. My friends and I would get these huge lengths of butcher paper, and we would outline them. And then we would go back and use index cards and colored highlighters. And there's a number of people out there that are champions of this process and teach it. And I'm not going to say it didn't work. I mean, I got a book out of it, but it didn't feel entirely right. And so then I tried the seat the pants method. I've done that a number of times. And sometimes now when I work with my editors, we'll flesh out a story more for a variety of reasons, because it's something that needs to fill their line, or because they're trying to go in a particular direction with the story. So I guess that's a type of outlining. I think that's a very long way of saying I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but each book seems to choose its own developmental pace, and I try to just sort of respect that.
Gotcha. What tips or advice would you offer aspiring writers who are trying to write and publish their own novels?
That's funny. Just the other day, I was reviewing. I had read a book called Crooked Letter a couple years ago. It's a fantastic book, and for reasons I've now forgotten, I was reading a Tom Franklin interview, and at the very end they asked him this question. And Tom Franklin is a measured speaker, man of few words, and he said, well, I'd advise you to sit down and write every day. And he's absolutely right. And then he said, I'd advise you to continue reading. You cannot be a writer without reading. And then he pauses and he says, it's amazing to me how many writers don't do that. And I think that's true. If you get your ass in the chair and keep it there, you will improve as a writer. And I'm a firm believer in that. I was just talking to a friend about the dangers of taking days off. And I fully respect that many authors have jobs, children, and other distractions. And I was in that position myself. I'm a full-time writer now, but I've been in the position where I couldn't get to the chair every day. But to the extent that you can, you must. Because when you walk away from your story, it abandons you a little bit, and it's going to be much, much harder to get back to it.
Right.
So ass in chair.
So as a mother, how did you kind of do it? Did you wake up early, stay up late?
Well, I was lucky because I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was not able to work when my children were young. My brother and I talk about this a lot. When your kids are young, some people are able to sustain a publishing career. He and I both found that to be challenging. So there's a big gap in my. I continue to write, but I got a lot less done. Nowadays, I have one daughter in high school and one son in college, and for the last few years, with high school students, I had more time because they were away and they have their activities. Back when they were in middle school and I was doing a lot more carpooling and volunteering, I got really adept at taking whatever blocks of time I had and using them. Mm-hmm. I sort of scoff at people who insist that they have a rarefied writing environment. I think that's ridiculous. And I think each of those writers should go out and get a toddler and try to work for a week, because they will be a stronger writer at the end of it. So it made me adaptable.
Gotcha. You just talked about reading earlier. What have you read like in the last 6 or 8 months that really made an impression on you?
So I am, as everyone is, a fan of Gillian Flynn's book,
right.
Girl. I read Megan Abbott's Not Dare Me, the one before that. I'm sorry, it's escaping my mind, but I'm a huge fan of Megan Abbott's. I read a novel by a guy who is not yet published, but will be, and that's Benjamin Whitmer. He's a fantastic writer of darker crime stories. And Steve Ulfelder's, I encountered his first book through a friend, but he's fantastic, and his second book absolutely lives up to the promise of his first.
That's great. What are you working on now?
So right now I'm finishing my second standalone young adult thriller, and then I'll be working on an adult thriller for the remainder of the year. And then, I have a pretty packed schedule, and I kind of like it that way.
Great. Where can people find you online?
SophieLittlefield.com.
Great. Well, again, we've been speaking with Sophie Littlefield, author of the Stella Hardesty crime series. Her latest novel is A Bad Day for Mercy. It's available in bookstores now. I'll also have links to a lot of her other books. Sophie, thanks for doing the interview.
Thank you so much.
Sure.